listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin. To master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Once you walked in a forest of splendor in which everything you did and everything you thought was aligned. It is possible at this time to begin to return to the old knowledge. Intuitive healer and manifester Julia Griffin is here to talk about this unique time in history when all sentient beings, animals, plants, trees, and the earth are intent on creating this change. The wolves awakened her to the most incredible light, which opened gifts and brought knowledge that she longs to share. You are creators, and you are born to be creators of beauty, possibility, and joy. Join Julia on a journey into a beautiful and magical world where amazing possibilities exist. Let us help open the door. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening with Julia Griffin starts right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin, and you're listening to The Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. For those of you who don't know me or know about me, I awakened with wolves. When I met a real wolf, it talked to me just as people talk, and they taught me to read the energy of the heart. So I can intuitively hear plants, animals, and people. And this became my work as a result. If you're interested in knowing more, go to my website, trueself.com. Today, I'm very excited to have Evert Hopman as a guest, Evert Hopman. She's going to tell us about the Winter Solstice, the traditions that go back to Egypt, Roman times, the herbs, the Yule log, Santa Claus, and more. So let me tell you about Ellen. She's a master herbalist and homeopath who has been a Druid initiate since 1984. She's the author of several books, including Secret Medicines from Your Garden, The Sacred Herbs of Samhain, and A Legacy of Druids. She lives in Massachusetts, and her website is Ellen Evert, E-V-E-R-T, Hopman, Hopman.com. Today, I'm excited because we're going to talk about her new book, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the Winter Season. So welcome, Ellen.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm going to say for me, before we get started, I'm definitely like a spring, summer person. So to me, anything that I can do to make this holiday better, and I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I told my mother, I said, I hate Christmas. It's so much work. It's so glitzy. And she looked at me and she said, well, Julia, it would be terribly boring if it weren't. And so much of your work is like this, like how to make something out of the darkness and bring in the light and prepare what's coming in the later on in the year. So tell us a little bit about the importance of the winter solstice. Let's start there.
Well, as we move into the winter solstice season, which we are now, we're starting to move into it. Last night was the full moon, but after this, the moon is waning, and then we have the dark of the moon. And the dark of the moon coming up is actually the darkest time of year. And so it's the dark within the dark. And in ancient times, that was pretty scary because, when things are dark, that's when the really scary monsters come out. Okay, because the surface of the earth most resembles their underworld home. And so you have to prepare for that. So what do? You have light, you have fire. Those are that's really basic. And it's something that we still do. When you put lights on a Christmas tree, when you put lights on the house, when you light candles, you're following a very ancient practice that's been done for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. As the earth got dark, you had things like Yule logs, and candles and any kind of light that you could concoct, bonfires, And it's all to make the surroundings not hospitable for the nasty things. And also to keep your spirits up, because it's getting dark. It's getting really dark. And then after solstice is a time, it's really about 4 or 5 days when the sun kind of stays in the same place on the horizon. And you have the shortest days and the longest nights. And then after solstice, once solstice is finished, the sun gradually starts to come back. So that's the good news. By the time you get into late January already, you can see it. You can see the days lengthening. The birds start getting really active in February. If you pay attention, they start mating and making noise, and and it's all
And the
about
trees change. The trees start to move differently as the light returns. They're no longer like stiff and frozen.
Mhm. Yeah. And sap starts dripping. If you look at the maple trees in February, the sap actually explodes out of the bark, and then the squirrels eat the sap. But
So,
that's the good news. Just get through the dark, and then the sun comes back.
so I guess these things about light, they were twofold. One was to make yourself feel better and have less darkness, but I assume it was also for protection from the things that were in the darkness.
Right. As I said, there's scary things, and there's all kinds of traditions, like in Germanic traditions, Scandinavia, Germany, you have the wild hunt, which is this a group of spirits, the dead, and and other spirits that fly across the sky. So in the winter solstice season, if a big storm comes up and you have these clouds rushing across the sky, that's the wild hunt. Because
Okay.
that's when they come up. They come up from the underworld and they rush around. you know.
Mhm.
So
So they also believed there were wild spirits. So what was the Egyptian tradition? Because I know you go all the way back to Egypt. You talk about Roman times. It's an
mhm.
immense amount of material in your book.
Well, the oldest tradition that I could find a record of was the Egyptian solstice celebration, where they decorated the house with greenery. So in case you're wondering where that comes from, and they made fruitcake. So when you
Pretty
eat
interesting. I
fruitcake,
had no idea that that went on for so long.
yeah, that's where it started. So you can thank the Egyptians for that. And then they had a god, Horus, baby Horus,
Right.
who gets born at the winter solstice. Gets every year, baby Horus appears at the winter solstice, and he's part of the Holy Family, which is Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And that's a whole big thing if you want to look into it. But a lot of Christian dogma, like Day of Judgment, Holy Family, it all comes from the Egyptians. And that was the Holy Family and baby Horus who gets reborn. And then the Romans had a really fun time. They had something called Saturnalia in honor of the god Saturn, who is the god of the harvest. And again, it was around the winter solstice. And during the time of Saturnalia, slaves and their masters would trade places. So the slave would rule and the master would run around doing things for the slave. And it was all hilarious, I guess. And people would run through the street naked, and everybody would get really drunk,
And I was
So
going to say, it sounds like they had something really good to drink.
yeah. And well, they had lots of wine, of course.
Mhm.
And then that was the birthday of the god Mithras, who was a Persian deity of light, who gets born on December 25th. Does that sound familiar?
It's in all philosophies.
Yeah. And he was a Persian god, but he was a favorite of the Romans. They really liked Mithras, the god of light. He was also a god of justice and contracts and other things. So again, when the Christian church was putting itself together, because Christianity started out as a Jewish sect, right? And then it slowly, over 2,000 years, what they did was they kept appropriating pagan holidays. So the birthday of Mithras becomes the birthday of Jesus, And there's no evidence that Jesus was born on December, what, 24th or 25th? There's no evidence.
25th. Yeah, and a lot of biblical scholars believe because of the position of the stars, he was actually born in August.
Right.
But he was put in the story, just like when Christianity went into the Druid religion in England, they took all the holidays that they were already using and then put Christianity on top of the holidays. They changed it to mix up with that.
Well, they did that everywhere. They did that in
Yeah.
South America. They did that all over Europe. Rome became the capital of Catholic religion, and they took over the Roman holidays. So the
Yeah.
Saturnalia, and the birth date of Mithras becomes the Christmas.
Right. I'm familiar.
Yeah, but that was a policy. It was an actual written, deliberate policy that one of the popes, I forget which one is, I think it's in the book. One of the popes actually made a declaration that that's what you should do. If you're a missionary and you move into a new area to missionize, you should find out what the local festivals are, and wherever possible, take them over. And
Right.
they took over the holy wells, and they took over the holy sites, and they plopped churches down on top of previously holy sites for pagans,
I guess it was a good way to get people to convert.
Yeah, because people were used to going to those places, and they were used to celebrating at certain times of year. So you just took the already existing customs and melded it into Christianity. That's what they
Mhm.
did.
Right. So in other words, what we're saying is all the things that we're celebrating are essentially worldwide and very ancient for us in our timeline.
Yeah, much older than Christianity. Yeah.
Mhm. So just for something fun, tell us about the Christmas tree. Why do we have Christmas trees? I know about the evergreen, but there has to be more than that.
Okay, so there's a myth going around that Martin Luther invented the Christmas tree. That's the one I always heard when I was growing up. But there's no evidence for that either. So what happened was, in the Middle Ages, you had passion plays, and those were plays that told biblical stories. Most people didn't read, so the way you learned the Bible was either by looking at pictures, tapestries, paintings, or by going to plays. And so the Adam and Eve play was done around Christmas time. I'm not sure why, but then so anyway, they had to have a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or a tree of knowledge, in the play. And this is in Europe. So in Europe, in December, around Christmas time, if you're going to go get a tree, a regular tree is not going to have any leaves on it, and it's not going to look too good. So what do? You look for something green, and you're going to find a conifer. And that became a prop. Sometimes they used conifers as props. Sometimes they made props out of wood, a pyramid-shaped wood that was supposed to represent the tree. So those were
that's in some paintings. I've seen that in some medieval paintings. Yeah.
And then they were decorating the trees or the pyramids with communion wafers, which are round like the sun. They would hang those on there, and they would decorate it with apples, because apples are red, right? And there is no apple in the story. If you go back and read the Bible, there is no apple. Eve did not have an apple. But anyway, they couldn't think of anything sweeter or more special than an apple. So they would hang apples, So now you had things hanging off the tree, and that was the big prop. So that was that was the beginning of it. And of course, the Egyptians and the Romans already had a tradition of decorating the house with greenery. So that was already kind of in people's minds. And then in 1441 in Estonia, not Germany, people think this started in Germany, but it was in Estonia, there was a guild of merchants who took one of these trees, decorated. Maybe it was after the play was finished. They took it to the town square, and they put it there, and everybody danced around it. And then they set it on fire.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And so we don't know if it was a spruce tree or if it was one of those wooden pyramids. But they decorated it with paper, fruit, toys, and flowers before they burned it. Um, anyway, so that was outdoors. The trees were not in houses. It wasn't until 1605 in Germany that trees started being brought into the homes. And again, that was part of the Paradise play, the idea of Adam and Eve and the apple and all that. And anyway, so it was popularized by Victoria and Albert. Queen
Oh,
Victoria.
interesting.
They were the ones who made it really popular. And then that was in England. And then German immigrants brought it to America. And of course, because it was a royal custom, everybody was trying to imitate Albert and Victoria. And so everybody had to have a Christmas tree.
Right. So that's how they were popularized. If I
Right.
remember correctly, the Druids worshipped the evergreen trees because they were symbolic of the soul, that no matter what happened or went on in the world, they remained green.
Well, I'm not sure if that is ancient Druid lore or modern Druid lore, but because all trees are sacred for Druids. I happen to be a
I
Druid.
think I read that in The White Goddess by Robert Graves.
Right. And
They had special meaning because of that. So that is modern.
Robert Graves made up a lot of stuff.
Good to know.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Okay.
In fact, right now on Facebook, everybody's talking about half the people think that the White Goddess is all ancient, accurate, and the other half go, no, no, no. You know, he made up a lot of stuff.
Right. So whenever he was in doubt, he just inserted a good story.
Yeah, he just, I don't know. But people still do this today. There's so little information about actual Druid ceremonies that you have to make things up because just to fill in the gaps, but for Druids, every tree is sacred. It's not just the conifers. And I like to say,
I appreciate the clarification. I like corrected. So thank you.
Church. Every tree is a church for a Druid.
Mhm.
You can stand in front of a little tiny tree and be in church, or you can stand in front of a redwood tree and be in church.
They were all holy.
They're all sacred because the roots go down to the underworld of the Sidhe, the fairies, where the ancestors and the fairies are in the underworld. So the roots go down, the branches go up to the sky world, which is where the gods and the goddesses are. And then you, as a human, you stand in the middle next to the trunk, which is between earth and sky.
Right.
So you can go up, with the branches and go to the sky world, or go down through the roots. I'm talking about shamanically. You can go down to the roots, to the underworld. And those are called the three worlds. And every tree does that. So.
And we have to do that every day of our lives, really. We can go down or up or stay in the middle.
Right.
So what is the difference between Yule and Christmas?
Well, Christmas is the Christ Mass. And again, Christmas or Christ Mass is the Christian observance. Yule is the pagan observance, basically. Excuse me.
But they're both sort of put together nowadays, I would think.
Well, yeah. Not for pagans. Pagans don't think of Christmas as the same as Yule. Because Yule is more about the fires and the Yule logs and the solstice and the sun coming back and all that. That's, and the deities, and
it's more about the things that have meaning as opposed to just a holiday to celebrate Christ's birth and have presents.
Well, for Christians, I think the Christmas has a lot of meaning.
I do too. I love Christmas.
Yeah, and Hanukkah for Jewish people. And it's interesting that Hanukkah starts at the dark of the moon again, at the darkest moon, at the darkest time of year. And then you start lighting the candles. And what are you doing? You're same thing. You're bringing back the light. And again, Hanukkah, they have all these stories associated with it, with about the Maccabees and the oil lamp that didn't go out and all that. But it has to be much older than that, much older, because it's all about bringing back the light, which is what, all the traditions seem to be doing that.
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, tell us where Santa Claus came from. I know from my reading, and again, you may need to correct me, Santa Claus was like, he ruled merchants and goodwill and things like that. The energy that he ruled.
Well, there was Saint Nicholas.
That's probably who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, he was a real person. He was a bishop, and he was unusual in that he was giving away his money and taking care of people, which didn't always happen.
Yeah. A lot of the time it went the other way.
Yeah. So when Nicholas heard about some really poor girls that needed a dowry, for example, he would give money to the parents, and he just liked to give gifts to people. And so he became Saint Nicholas, and he's kind of a symbol of charity. And the red and white Santa Claus that we think of was invented, I think, it's either by Coca-Cola. Yeah, it must have been Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola company came up with that, because he was never red and white like that until they came up with that. But he's a spirit. I mean, he's a real spirit. And the idea that he comes down the chimney, that's a very ancient idea, because that's why you have to have a Yule log. The Yule log is supposed to burn continuously for 12 days. Why? Because when your house is all locked up in the wintertime to keep the cold out, the only two places where something can come in is down the chimney or in the keyhole.
Oh, fascinating.
So make sure your keyholes are stopped with a key or something, But then you have the Yule log. But what's interesting is the Yule log keeps bad things from coming into the house, but it doesn't keep Santa Claus away. And also La Befana, who's the Christmas witch, she comes down the chimney, and she brings gifts for kids, and she doesn't get affected. So apparently good spirits like the light. They have no problem with it, the light and the fire and all that. It's just the bad ones that get scared away.
I would agree with that. So tell us about the witch that comes down the chimney and the origin of that.
La Befana, she's a great character. I have a children's book called Once Around the Sun, Stories, Crafts, and Recipes to Celebrate the Sacred Earth Year. And I have a whole story about La Befana in there. She rides a broom. So I have a story about her. I have La Befana cake with a recipe, and then I have instructions for making a besom, which is a traditional witch's broom. And this is all for kids, but grown-ups like it too. But La Befana rides across the sky on her broom. She's dressed all in black, because very, very logical, because if you're coming down the chimney, you're going to get soot all over you. So you don't want to be wearing colors coming down the chimney. So she wears black, and because she has a broom, I guess she really likes brooms, because in Italy, the tradition is that you're supposed to have a new broom. And she comes around Epiphany, which is January 5th. But you put your new broom next to the hearth, next to the fireplace. And then she comes down and she enters the home, and she blesses the new broom. So the next day you sweep out the whole house with your newly blessed broom. But she also leaves presents for the kids.
Well, My grandfather, my papa, was Scottish, and he would get a new broom every New Year's Eve, and at the second that it turned midnight, we had to sweep out the whole house, or he was convinced we would have bad luck. And it was a large house, so it would get pretty cold before we were done.
Did you open the front door and the back door? Okay. Yeah, you're supposed to do that to let the old year out and the new year in. And did you burn juniper?
No, we usually had a fire going, but I don't think that it was juniper. I guess that was as far as his tradition went, but he said he had done it since he was a child and we were going to do it. He didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Well,
was really important to him.
The old traditional Scottish way, this is at New Year's, though. It's not.
Mhm. Yeah, this was New Year's.
Right, New Year's. You burn juniper in the fireplace, in the hearth,
Mhm.
and but you have to have smoke. You have to smoke the whole house.
Mhm.
Basically, you're smudging the house.
Right.
So you fumigate the house with juniper, and the smoke has to reach all the rooms, you know. And you do the same thing in the barn. You take juniper, you set it on fire, and you go around the barn, and it's called seining. Seining is purification.
Mhm.
Purification by fire.
That's so interesting because you're the first person who had any explanation as to what he was doing. My grandmother would shake her head and she said, well, he just might as well do it as fast as we can. I can't change his mind.
Oh, he was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
If you
I guess if you don't have a fireplace, you could dry juniper or burn the berries if you wanted
smudging.
to.
You're
Yeah.
smudging. The juniper was really the herb of choice. I mean, you could use any aromatic. You could use rosemary, sage, but you know how in
Sure.
Native American traditions, the white sage is the popular herb for this. But in Northern Europe, it was juniper. That was the number one thing, and you see it in all the Northern European countries.
It's so interesting how all these things have come together. It's like they're sandwiched, but if you look at the layers, they all make sense.
Yeah. Well, we've been doing the same thing for thousands of years, you know.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I think people really underestimate the power of children and their energy. But just think about making children happy for an entire nation or part of a nation, how much positive energy that is in a time of darkness.
Mm-hmm. Not just children. I mean,
Everyone.
everyone. That's
Yeah.
why we eat lots of food. You know, we started Thanksgiving. That's really the beginning of dealing with the dark is Thanksgiving, and then it goes gradually into Christmas, and we have all our Christmas parties. Then we have New Year's. So there's this whole string of gluttonous
Events.
gorging festivals, you know.
Yeah. But the good thing about it is by the time you recover from Christmas and you get through New Year's, the light is beginning to return.
That's
I
right.
guess it was all put together to get us through that time of incredible darkness.
Right. Generosity, very important. Let the community know that you're going to help, that you're not going to withhold food in the
Right.
dark, in the cold. You're going to be there, you know, you're willing to feed people. You know, same thing at Halloween, actually. It starts with Halloween. You're feeding people and you're showing generosity, you know.
Mhm. So it's fascinating to think that not just what you're doing, which is important, but the quality of generosity is one of the things that does get us through the darkness.
Mhm. Very important.
And that's really, really fascinating in my mind. So I think that we're ready to go to break. So let me tell everyone that I've been talking with Evert Hopman about her new book, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the Winter Season. We can all benefit with magical ways to deal with the holiday season and work with the. And we'll tell you more when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin at OneTrueSelf.com. That's onetrueself.com. I'm talking with Evert Hopman about her new book, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the Winter Season. In this segment, we're going to talk about some of the herbs and the energy that they bring in. And we may talk about divination for Yule as well. So stay tuned. It's interesting. You can get these herbs and plants and change the energy of your home very quickly. So Ellen, why don't you tell us about that? The herbs that go in the house.
So there are certain classic plants like holly and pine, things like that, that we associate with Christmas. And there's a reason why. These are perennials. Okay, they stay green all winter. And in ancient times, the thinking was that a plant that knew how to stay green all winter obviously had a lot of wisdom, because this plant could withstand the heat of summer. It did fine in summer. It could also withstand the cold of winter. So it had persistence, it had wisdom, it had magic, it had power, it had strength. These are qualities that you bring into the home by having these plants in the home, and by hanging them on the door, or putting them over the door, so that everybody walking through, coming and going, gets the energy of the plant. So I'll just go through specific ancient customs pertaining to these plants. For example, holly. I talked about Saturnalia before, but when the Romans gave each other gifts, which they did at Saturnalia, which is basically around the winter solstice, they would wrap the gift in cloth. They didn't have wrapping paper, and ribbons, and then they would tuck a little piece of holly under the ribbon. They would decorate each gift with holly. And holly it's one of these plants that stays green, but it's also a very protective plant because it's a warrior plant. If you take holly leaves and you hold them in your hand, they're going to prick you. Okay. And the berries look like drops of blood. And in Scottish tradition, every clan had a sacred plant, but I can't remember which clan it was, but at least one of them had the holly, and you put that in your cap when you go into battle, because it's a warrior plant. And what it would do is it would prevent evil spirits or ill-intentioned fairies from coming into the house, because not all fairies are nice. A lot of them don't like people, and who can blame them because of the way we act, So that's the holly. And then ivy, I had mentioned that baby Horus gets born at the winter solstice in Egypt, and ivy was something that they would decorate the house with. But in England, in Victorian times, the holly and the ivy symbolized feminine energy, and holly symbolized masculine energy. So that they would decorate churches with holly and ivy. So holly and ivy would go on the altar. They also put mistletoe in the churches, but that's an old Druidic thing. Anyway, mistletoe, the only Druid ritual that we actually have written down. If anybody tells you that they know a Druid ritual and it's not this one, they're fibbing.
Thank you.
Because the only one that we have written down is, and it was written down by Pliny, who was a Roman naturalist and historian. But the Druids would dress in white, and that was probably the only time they dressed in white, because if you've ever tried wearing white robes and you're traipsing around in the woods, they look pretty awful pretty quick. So they would wear white, and probably because the mistletoe has white berries. So to honor the mistletoe, you wear white. And one Druid climbs up the oak tree, because you look for mistletoe growing on oak. Mistletoe grows on lots of trees, but when you find it growing on oak, it's a big deal. And one Druid would climb the tree, and with a golden sickle, which couldn't have been gold because that's too soft, it was probably bronze, um, would cut down the mistletoe. And then another druid would be standing under the tree holding a cloth, a white cloth, and the mistletoe falls on the cloth. It's not allowed to touch the ground. It can only fall in the cloth. It was done. This was done on the 6th night of the moon. So what does that mean? It's the 6th night after the first appearance of the moon. So after the dark of the moon, you wait 6 nights, and then they would sacrifice 2 white oxen,
Wow.
which is a very big deal.
Yeah.
They had to be white. And so why? So you ask yourself, why? What's the big deal? Well, it turns out, I mean, I'm an herbalist. Okay. I've been studying this for a long time. And I actually have a book, this one, Druid's Herbal for the Sacred Earth Year, where I have an entire chapter on mistletoe, just on mistletoe. Mistletoe has amazing herbal properties. The Viscum album, which is a European mistletoe. It's not the stuff that grows here in America. It's European mistletoe. The American one is pretty poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
The European one, you can use the stems and the leaves, not the berries. Okay. And it's a cancer treatment. And there's even, there's a medicine called Iscador, which comes from mistletoe growing on oak. And it turns out that, I mean, mistletoe grows on apple trees, it grows on poplars, but when it's found growing on oak, it has the most potent anti-tumor properties. And I think that the Druids knew exactly what they were doing, because they used baths. You know, they didn't have needles to inject stuff into your bloodstream, but they would put people in herbal baths. And yew was one of the ones that they used. And in modern times, yew is a medicine. It's for breast cancer. And I think they knew exactly what they were doing. And the same thing with mistletoe. I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. But I mean, I went to Ireland. I've been there several times, but one time I went and I met some Druids, and none of this is written down, but they just said, oh yeah, the Druids would bathe people in baths of yew and bring them back to life. And so I thought about that. Why would they be bathing people in baths of yew? Well, yew is a cancer medicine, and your skin would take it in if it was a hot bath.
So I'm going to interrupt for a second, because people may be wondering, well, how would you get all this from a bath? With the average bath here in the United States, you absorb a pint of the water and whatever is in it. If you're in the tub for, I think it's 10 to 15 minutes. That's a lot.
Yeah. So anyway, in the book, The Druid's Herbal for the Sacred Earth Year, I talk about that. So then another one is boxwood. Maybe not quite as common, but some people actually make Christmas trees out of boxwood. Anyway, it's another evergreen tree, all the evergreens are called trees of immortality, because they don't die in the winter, they stay green. And boxwood has very tightly packed leaves. So it symbolizes abundance, fertility, again, persistence, strength. In ancient Roman times, the emperors, people that really had money, they would make a hedge of boxwood around the property, just as a protective device. It's magical protection. Then another one is bayberry, bayberry candles, bayberry oil. Bayberry candles, you can make them from the berries. If you simmer the berries, they release wax, and you can collect the wax, but you need a lot of bayberries but that scent, that aromatic scent, is very purifying to the home. And if you make a bayberry candle, you're supposed to burn it all the way down. You don't just burn it a little bit and then blow it out. It has to burn all the way to the socket. And you can do that on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, and that brings luck and abundance into the home. Cranberries. We start eating cranberries at Thanksgiving, but cranberries can be strung and put on the Christmas tree, but cranberries are also eaten. They are red, which is fire and blood, life and hope and warmth. That's what they bring. Poinsettia. People give gifts of poinsettia, or they decorate the home with poinsettia, which is native to Mexico, was a sacred plant of the Aztecs. And in the 17th century, the Franciscan monks, the missionaries that went down there to convert people, they recognized that it was a sacred plant of the Aztecs. So they said, well, let's have a Christmas procession, or let's decorate the church. So they carried the plants in the procession, and then they took them to the church and they decorated the church. And and that, again, that's another example of taking an ancient indigenous practice and weaving it into the Christian story.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah. So
I understand, I'm looking at some of the notes and questions, but so now we understand why red and green are associated with Yule. What about white and gold?
Well, white is a very interesting color. It's snow, for Northern Europeans, but it's also a color of death. Because when you think of, at Halloween, when you see pictures of ghosts, right?
Right.
They're white. Why are they white? Because the winding shroud, I don't even know. I don't think people even do that anymore, but we still think of ghosts as white because the winding shroud is white. So at this time, when the weather is getting really cold and the snow is coming and a lot of things die, the trees look like they're dead, even though they're not. The plants die back. They do come back in the spring, but everything seems to be dying. So white is about purification, the purification of snow, which starts the whole cycle over again. But it's also about death. And so that's happening this time of year. And gold is the stars. When the leaves fall off the trees, now you can look up in the sky and you can see the stars in a way that you couldn't in the summer, unless you were in the middle of a big field. But the stars twinkling, and the firelight.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, so we have green, which is the herbs of immortality. We have red, which is life and blood, lifeblood. Life will continue, right? Then we have the purification and death of the color white, and then the stars of the color gold.
I love it. So tell us a few more herbs that might be used in teas or drinks or punches around the Yule time.
Well, you and I were talking a little bit before we even started this, but I have a whole section in the book, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas, on winter remedies. And for example, I got COVID very early, before we even knew what it was. So that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
I was sitting here living at home by myself, trying to decide whether I was going to call an ambulance, because I'd never experienced anything like that. I felt like my throat was like I was being choked and I couldn't breathe, and I think that a lot of people went to the hospital and went on ventilators when that happened. But I, being me, I just said, do what you always do. And I have a wonderful combination, which is elderberry and echinacea, which is great for viruses. It's not antibacterial, it's for viruses, elderberry especially, it prevents viruses from attaching to the body. So I just did my routine every 2 hours in hot water or tea, elderberry and echinacea, and I got through it. 2 days later, I was pretty much done. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and then after that was in January, and they didn't announce it until March, which they should have announced it a lot sooner,
Yeah,
because
they should have.
we knew about it actually in November
Mhm.
of the year before. We already knew about it because I was reading about pneumonic plague coming out of China. I was reading about it in November in scientific journals,
Right.
and they didn't tell anybody. So anyway, but that's just one example. So I have that in the book. And then as you mentioned, I think I had a lot of recipes. I have a lot of recipes from all over the world. So if you're Polish, for example, you can find traditional Polish food in there. If you're Russian, there's Russian food, German food, English food, Australian food, Venezuelan food, Mexican food. I mean, I have all these traditional Christmas recipes. And I also have brews, drinks, and I kind of imagined people celebrating, solstice with a nice ceremonial drink. But what I do is I list the magical properties of every ingredient. So you can make a drink, for example. You could just make it as a cocktail. I have Nigerian cocktails and things like that. Or you can look at each magical ingredient, and then the drink becomes a potion. So, so
And I
you
guess you could make a wish and ask for all those things to be activated.
exactly. And I talk about chanting, which is just a rhyme describing what you're asking for. It could be health, it could be happiness, it could be healing, whatever it is you're asking for, make a little chant. And while you're making the brew, you stir it, clockwise, and you chant, and you hold the magical properties in your mind. And that's a potion.
I do want to say something though about your herbal information. It is some of the best researched information I have ever seen about herbs. She gives you cautions that no one else does. She must have every single possible way of using these herbs and tells you why it works. It is incredibly thorough. If you're interested at all in herbs, I really would say buy this book and read about it.
Yeah, I actually have 3 books now. One is called The Sacred Herbs of Samhain. Samhain is Halloween. Plants to Contact the Spirits of the Dead. And Sacred Herbs of Spring, Magical Healing and Edible Plants to Celebrate Beltane, which is May Day. And now The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas. And in all 3 books, I give you the lore, the magic, the medicinal properties, a recipe, and the cautions, as you said. I'm very big on cautions. But the one, I mean, the cautions are general. They're like, if you're pregnant, don't take this. If you have high blood pressure, don't take this. If you're diabetic, don't take this. Like that. But the one thing that there just isn't room in a book. But if you're on medications, if you're on any kind of medications for any herb, you have to go to herbal and medicine contraindications. You can Google that and see whatever medicine you're on. If you're on allopathic medication, and I don't care if it's over the counter, if it's something you're taking regularly, you have to do that, and then see if there's a contraindication, because sometimes herbs and allopathic medicines don't go well together.
And
I mean,
it is really important.
if you're drinking just for fun, taking a few sips of a magical brew, that's not going to affect you. But if you're going to be drinking a lot of something, check it against your medications.
So if we're looking at I know, I was going to ask you, tell us a little bit about divination at Yule.
Okay, so again, there's a whole chapter on that. And there's various things that have been done for centuries. For example, is your Christmas warm or cold? if you have a warm winter, there's an old saying, if the winter is warm, the graveyards will open. Why is that? You actually, you want a cold winter, because a cold winter kills off pathogens. It kills off viruses, bacteria, bugs, So it also means that plants are not going to grow. If you have a warm winter, plants are not going to grow so well the next spring. Because again, cold is needed to kill off insects and to kill off pathogens of the plants. So that's just one example. But then I have other like fun traditions. Unmarried women would go to the hen house on Christmas Eve and tap on the door. If a hen responds, that means she will remain single. If a cock crows, that means she's going to get married.
That's kind of fun.
And then there's something called the flower of the well, which is a British tradition. The first water drawn from the well on New Year's, and actually this is big in Scotland. They do this in Scotland. The first water drawn brings special luck. And if a woman is the first one at the well, and it's especially lucky if you wait for the sun, you want to see the sun hitting the water. Okay. And then you gather up that water that had the sun hitting it. And if a woman does that, she will marry within the year. And you can also give that first water to the cows, which will guarantee more milk. And if you keep it in a bottle, it'll protect the house. Another thing is this is something, for example, around my house right now, the bushes are loaded with berries. But if your holly bush, for example, has a lot of berries, that means that the winter is going to be hard. And there's just so much in that.
No.
There's a Polish tradition that they do. You take hot wax, liquid hot wax, and you pour it into cold water. For example, a stream, really cold water. And then what happens is it gels and it turns into a symbol. And you look at the symbol and you see what it is, and that gives you a reading.
Those are all so much fun.
Yeah, you could do that on Christmas Eve. You could do that on New Year's Eve.
This is all such fascinating and good information, but we're coming to the end of the show. So I want to thank you, Ellen, and I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to buy her book, which you can see is just packed with information and really good recipes. It's The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the Winter Season. And you can get started with some of her wonderful ideas, recipes, and potions, and work with a holiday. So, Ellen, would you share your website with our listeners so they can come and find you?
Yeah, if you want a signed copy, just make sure you include a note. I sell books through PayPal. If you go to elleneverthopman.com, ELLENEVERTHOP, as in Paul, MAN.com, you can order a book from me and I will autograph it, and I will put a personal note, but you have to tell me who you want it autographed to. And it would make a great, I think, Yuletide Christmas present.
I do too. And I want to make some of these recipes with children because I can see there's so many things in here that they would love. So thank you everyone for being with us today. You can sign up for my newsletter on my website, onetrueself.com. And you can receive tips about the energetic weather, astrology, development on a spiritual level, and finding a higher vibration. If you're interested in finding out more, or you have a question for me, don't hesitate to send an email to onetrueself@gmail.com. Hope to see you in a couple weeks, and thanks so much for listening.
Thank Thank you for listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Join us next time as Julia takes us deeper into the memory of the moments of light where transcendence and enlightenment emerge. The memory of the jewel of consciousness is always lived within you to tap into waves of energy and create huge changes by imagining the beauty of the vision and desires that are hidden in the heart. Learn to find your way back to nature, beauty, and your own heart, which holds the secrets of your existence and future. To discover more about Julia's adventures, animal communication, and the teachings she brings to every show, visit onetrueself.com. That's onetrueself.com. That's ONE, trueself.com.